It's Tuesday, May 9th, 2017. I'm your host, Sarah Mantle. We have a great show in store for you today. First up, we're going to check in with Chief of Police Paul McDonald. Then we'll chat with DPW Director Dan Santos. All of that on this episode of Barnstable Today. But first, let's go ahead and get a look at today's top headlines. The Hyannis Fire Department breaks ground on its new fire station. The department and supporters gathered at the station Monday morning.
Believed in the project that much. I knew it was the right thing to do, and I knew eventually the citizens would understand that. It was an education process that had to happen. We had to educate the citizens on what we needed, and they had to educate us on what they thought they could afford and what was right for them as well. You know, this is a community effort. It's not just a fire department effort. We have certain needs for sure, but it's part of the community. This building will be here for many, many years and be a central part of the community, and they have to have a say in it, and they did. And that's why it'll be a better project at the end of the day.
The existing station was built in the 60s, and it's full. We're out of space for the apparatus, we're out of space for the firefighters and their quarters, and we're out of space for the office area, fire prevention, etc. So the issue was the station needs a rehab, and at the end of the day, if we put significant funds into that building, we would still have a structure that does not support the needs of the fire department. So a new modern facility is necessary, and this is a wonderful day to get started.
Yeah, back then there was mainly all volunteer. It was just the chief and dispatcher, and then when they moved in here, they had 2 daytime people, firefighters, just in the daytime hours. And so after 4 o'clock in the afternoon, it was all volunteer fire department. They did about 500 calls a year. We're up over 6,000 calls a year now. And it's completely changed too. We do a lot of fires, but we also do the medical work, and that's the abundance of our work today. And we also do hazardous materials things. So, I mean, everything that when people don't know what to do, or they have a problem of any kind, the first thing they do is they call the fire department. And so that's what we do. We respond to all kinds of hazards and emergencies. And so the building, the biggest thing that we're trying to do in the building is make it safe for the personnel, because you have to separate things. We have a lot of hazardous materials that when you go out to a call, you're bringing that stuff back to the station. All the carcinogens are embedded into the turnout gear, and you have to separate all that. And on the medical side, you have all the equipment that gets infected with you have infectious diseases and everything else that are on the equipment that you have to sanitize, and you have to have separation of spaces. So the new facility will have those things incorporated in them, that you can separate the medical equipment from the clean from the dirty, and that's one of the big things. And for the firefighters, I think they're saying 68% of the firefighters are coming down with cancer, and so they're trying to design these buildings today for the fire service, so you're separating out these hazardous materials from their living spaces. Because in that building and all the other firehouses you see, the older ones, you come back from a call and you walk around the building, you got the equipment on, and you live there and you work there, and the office spaces are right off the apparatus floor, and it's a big problem.
I'd like to thank the people that worked on the building committee, our current commissioners, our retired commissioners. Chief Brunel, who recently retired, did yeoman's work in getting us this far, as well as a large committee made up of our business community and the residents. So they all put in a tremendous amount of hours to get us to this point, and I really want to thank them.
Project manager Paul Griffin expects the construction project to take about 2 years to complete. The school committee will consider a new proposal to adjust school start times. Under the proposal, all elementary schools would maintain the current schedule with start times at 9 a.m. Barnstable High School classes would begin at 8:15 a.m. and 2 4th through 7th grade buildings would begin at 7:20 a.m. 2 community forums will be held this month to discuss that proposal. The first will be held May 10th and the second May 17th. Both of those meetings will be held at Barnstable High School at 6 p.m. The Hyannis Water Supply Division is cleaning and replacing water mains along West Main Street in Hyannis. Water Supply Division Supervisor Hans Kaiser says it's important to keep the water mains functioning properly.
Place all the valves, all the hydrants, and all the water services up to the property line. We're doing this job as part of a master planning and master pipe replacement of the whole system. This project started at the West End Rotary, and it ends at La France. And after this project is done, which will be around June 15th, this part of the water system is as good as new, all through Hyannis. The system is over 100 years old, and we have a 30-year pipe replacement program, and we pick at it. We do a little bit each year, and we try to work together with the other divisions, the roads, the sewer division, the drainage. Directly after we do West Main Street here, the intersection with Pitcher's Way is going to be redone, so it just makes sense to do all construction at once, and that way you save money and save inconvenience to the people of Hyannis.
Drivers can expect delays on West Main Street in Hyannis through June 15th. Work will be done between 7 a.m. and 4 p.m. Temporary lane restrictions are probable at times. Motorists are advised to seek alternate routes to avoid that construction area. Another road construction project begins today that you might want to keep in mind when heading out. The Route 28 Airport Rotary in Hyannis will be milled and paved. Work will be done on the entire width of the pavement within the rotary. Crews will work on one lane at a time. Work will be done between the hours of 8 p.m. and 3 a.m. That's just to minimize traffic impacts. Work is expected to be complete by Sunday, May 14th. Up next, we'll chat with Chief of Police Paul McDonald. The chief must be busy this morning working on some very important issues, but in the interim, we have for you Natural Resource Officer, Animal Control Officer Charlie Lewis. He's going to tell us all about rabies baiting on Cape Cod. So Charlie, so glad you could sit down with me today. I want to talk a little bit about rabies vaccine distribution, and this is actually happening for wildlife on Cape Cod. So talk to me a little bit about the rabies vaccine distribution program.
Okay, the program actually started back in '94, and it originally was along the canal, and as rabies made its way through the barrier, we extended the zone and we went all the way to Provincetown. Since there's been no positive cases, the zones have been shifted back up, In fact, now we're covering all the way to Halifax, over through Rochester and Marion, all of pretty much Plymouth now. So on the Cape side, we have the Upper Cape, and the zone now is right to the Barnstable Yarmouth town line.
Wow.
So, and they have 340 of these bait stations now.
What is this? This is a bait station. Tell me a little bit about this. This is what it looks like. So if someone was walking along and saw one of these, this is what a bait station looks like.
Yeah. What happens, they put bait in the top, and it filters down into the center here, and these are attached to a tree. And they're painted this color so that nobody sees them, obviously. And we put a little sticker on there to say who we are. And the baits will be in there for approximately 2 to 3 weeks. As the baits come out, the animals get them and eat them, and they get vaccinated.
We're tricking the animals and making sure that they have their rabies vaccine.
Yep.
So let's say someone was walking along with their animal, maybe a rabies packet fell out or something, and it came across, a human came across with their animal. If an animal eats it, is it safe?
There's no issues with it. The dog may or other animal may get a sick stomach from it, but it's just rabies vaccine, so it'll actually inoculate the dog, and it doesn't hurt them at all. Most dogs, they have ill effects at all.
Great. So if they had an ill stomach, not a big deal, not a big worry, just kind of upset their tummy a little bit.
But we do ask if there are any interactions with animals other than the wildlife, that they call public health and let them know. Same thing with any humans that may pick up a packet. We ask that you wash your hands extremely quickly. Good 15 minutes under the water is great. And just notify public health, and that way we know approximately how many people or how many baits that aren't going to get to wildlife.
Interesting. Okay, so you're more of a monitoring reason for individuals who come across a bait packet to call.
Right. Yeah, bait packets are very similar to this, only they say USDA on them, and they're covered with fish meal. And I didn't bring one of them in because, number one, I don't have one yet, but they also, because they're contaminating, we wouldn't want to do that here.
Right.
And they smell, so. They
don't smell the greatest.
No. The bait stations have bait in them as of Wednesday this week. All of the bait stations will be filled by today. And our hand baiting program will start Monday. In Barnstable, we'll be baiting from the Route 6A north, from the Yarmouth Town line to Route 132, and then up Oak Street along Route 6, all the way to the Sandwich line.
And this has been shown to be a very successful program. What are our rates for rabies and wildlife here on the Cape?
Well, we've been extremely lucky, and that's why we've been able to move the bait zone further north as we speak, and that we haven't had any positive cases now. The last in Barnstable was 2.5 years ago.
Wow, pretty good.
So, yeah, it definitely is effective. What USDA does, their guys go out after the baits have been consumed. They wait 2 or 3 weeks, and they'll actually live trap animals. They take and anesthetize them. They draw blood, and they pop a tooth out, and they can tell because there's a stain in the bait itself. So they can tell whether the animal's eaten it, and then when they do the blood workup, they can tell whether or not it's got an inoculation.
Wow.
That it's effective. So far everything is proven to be on the up and up. In fact, this model, Cape Cod Rabies Bait Program, is actually a model for across the country and other regions, and been very successful in Texas and also along the Ohio River. There's an area out there that they've got a similar program.
Who runs the rabies baiting program here on the Cape?
Cape Cod Rabies Task Force, in conjunction with USDA. Public health is involved, as well as the cities and towns, in a lot of volunteers. Senior AmeriCorps does a lot of the hand baiting. The USDA guys actually fill the bait stations and do all the live trapping and everything.
How long does it actually take to put out all of the baits and the hand baiting, and how long does that take?
The hand baiting is done over the course of 2 or 3 days, and that's in the specific areas. And the bait stations, it takes them 2 or 3 days to fill.
Wow.
You know.
And then how long do you expect for them to be out there and for wildlife to consume them? How long does that part take?
These packets will be gone within 4 to 5 days, most often, and out of the bait stations within 2 weeks.
Wow.
They're pretty much gone, and they actually put a trail cam on some of these, and you can tell it's the same animal coming back. And so they'll readjust that particular station so that that doesn't continue.
You know, that's something I never would have thought of, and so interesting that they monitor those with cameras.
Yeah, it's there's been a learning curve along the way. I will say that what started out in the original days is a little bit different than today. We never had the bait stations, and this is a real bonus. They don't put these packets in the bait station. They use the old fish meal blocks, and they're designed with the rabies capsule in the center.
Wonderful. Anything else you want us to know about rabies baiting before you head out?
Just that if someone should happen to, if you pick one up, we do like to know. And obviously, it's very important to keep the dogs on the leash, short leash, for at least the next week to 7 days, say. After that, the extendable leashes are fine. But if you see a bush area, keep the dog out of it, and that way we know that the bait is going to wildlife and not being wasted.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Charlie, for joining us today and telling us everything we need to know about the rabies vaccine distribution. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Our guest today, Animal Control Officer Charlie Lewis. Joining me now live on the phone, DPW Director Dan Santos. Dan, I know you've been working, you and your department have been working very hard with the Water Resources Advisory Committee, working on some tough wastewater issues here. Can you give us an update on the work you've been doing?
Yes, I certainly can. We've been working for about the last 2 years on the effort that was put together by the Cape Cod Commission on the 208 plan, which is really just a water quality management plan that's required by the federal government for non-point source pollution. And septic systems are considered non-point source pollution, so that's why it's a wastewater issue. But as part of that, we're looking at the comprehensive wastewater picture in the town of Barnstable, and this group has been working with a team from my office, and we've had some consultants providing some additional information to come up with the town's plan that'll take us 50 years into the future, basically, for wastewater planning. And next Wednesday, the 17th, we're going to be presenting that draft plan to the Water Resources Advisory Committee at their monthly meeting. And at that point, that group will take the plan and they'll work with it and wrestle with it and comment on it over the next several months, right through the summer, to come up with a plan that we ultimately want to present to the town council and get their input as to moving it to the next step would be really the public involvement piece. So this plan needs to be the town of Barnstable's plan that has buy-in from the community, from the leadership, from the policymakers, from the technical people, because this is a long-term, very costly endeavor. And what we're trying to solve here is a couple of things, but with the 208 primarily, we are trying to reverse all of the nitrogen and nutrient contamination that's gone into our coastal estuaries and bays and killed off eelgrass, and that's why we don't have as much shellfish or as many fish, and we've really done a lot of damage, in the last half century because of all this nitrogen input. So now we're trying to figure out how to reduce that by eliminating it at the source and having different kinds of alternatives and treatment systems that we can put in place to minimize that nitrogen and start getting some of those species to start growing back in our coastal estuaries, and so that they will be once again healthy and doing good for us.
Yeah, as a resident too, listening to you talk about the history of the plan and how long it's taken to develop, that makes me feel really good, just because it's not rushed. So this is something that everyone's been working on for a very long time. I'm glad to hear that the Water Resources Advisory Committee will also have some time with it, and that residents will weigh in. At what point are you really looking for that resident feedback? Well, we talked a little bit about the timeline. When do you expect the residents to start interacting?
There'll be a big push to get out there and talk about this and get input probably the end of this year, calendar year, early next year. I'm sure there'll be things on Channel 18, and there'll be meetings, and there'll be briefings and mailings, and we want people, to understand the issue and ask questions and provide input so that the plan that moves forward is the best one for our town. And right now it's at the technical stage, so most of what we're doing is very technical. How do we solve the problem? But there's other pieces of that, just general acceptability, but cost. We're going to turn it over as part of this Water Resources Advisory Committee group. They have a financial subcommittee that are going to be taking that on basically this summer and fall, and looking at opportunities for financing this. And again, this isn't all at once. It's over decades, but it's going to be several $100 million. This is the biggest infrastructure project the town and the Cape will really ever see.
And this is something too, do we have deadlines as far as getting this plan enacted?
Well, no, there's no specific deadline. The Department of Environmental Protection, who oversees these plans, you generally need to be working on them, and because towns do and are moving in the right direction, it's really not an enforcement issue. I assume that if a town didn't do anything, they'd be taken to task, and that's one reason we had that whole 208 effort, was because the EPA, the United States EPA, didn't think that the EPA was sued by the Conservation Law Foundation, who were looking at the issue and decided that the EPA wasn't doing enough on Cape Cod to comply with the Clean Water Act. And so that was the whole genesis of this 208 plan. And so, they're really looking at, we had to do the first part of it a year ago, and we did that. And then they were talking about 5 years for the next phase, but we'll have completed that well before then.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much for giving us an update. Of course, we'll keep an eye out for that meeting with the Water Resources Advisory Committee to see that plan. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Look forward to chatting with you again next week.
Okay.
All right. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Our guest today, DPW Director Dan Santos. Now let's find out what's happening around town in today's community calendar. Well, are you looking for a fun Friday night activity that includes musical entertainment and refreshments? Then you can join the Hyannis Public Library fundraiser at Cape Cod Beer this Friday, May 12th. The event kicks off at 7 p.m. Tickets can be purchased at the event, at the library, or online with PayPal for just $25. You can help local businesses and the local economy by shopping local this Saturday. This Saturday is Shop Local Day. Many Hyannis retailers are participating and will have special discounts for their customers. For more information, you can visit HyannisMainStreet.com. Here's a look at this week's board, committee, and commission meeting schedule. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. We're going to be back tomorrow with another great show for you. On tomorrow's show, we'll get the latest real estate numbers with Register of Deeds Jack Mead. We'll hear from Cape Cod Regional Transit Administrator Tom Kerr about how they're reaching out to veterans this Memorial Day weekend. And we'll chat with Finance Director Mark Milne. For Barnstable Today, I'm Sarah Mannel.